Okay, we're ready to go ahead and get started. I'd like to thank you again for joining us. Everyone on this call will be in listen-only mode, but we definitely encourage you to submit your questions through the question and chat bar through GoToMeeting. Without any further ado, I would like to introduce our President and CEO, Doug Nicholas.
Thanks, Shannon. Appreciate it. And so I just wanted to thank everyone today for dialing in and being part of this announcement. And I also really wanted to let everybody know about the upcoming customer roundup that we're having. It's our second one. We had one last year here in Scottsdale, and it was very successful. This year is going to be bigger and better. And the format for the presentations this year are going to be geared around kind of three tracks. We're going to have tracks for executives talking about industry trends, where we see the industry going, some of the higher level tools and integration practices that are being done by customers out in the industry, and then from there we're also going to be doing offering some pretty extensive training classes for users and people from project controls and estimating. And then the third area that we will be doing is customer case studies. So customers will actually be doing and showing how they're using hard dollar within their organizations, the kind of successes they're having, the integrations. We'll have numerous partners there, so third-party products that we interface with, and other people who are doing a lot of innovation in the project controls and project cost management area. So it's going to be a really, really good conference, and it's not just focused around hard dollar. What we really want to do is explore and promote the concept of project cost management. And of course, we'll also be doing awards, and we'll have the Cattle Barons Ball on Thursday afternoon. And we have several really top flight speakers, and one of them is a really good friend of mine, Tom Lehman. He plays on the senior tour now, but Tom is the only professional golfer who has been Golfer of the Year, both in the Nationwide, PGA, and the Senior Tour. He was Ryder Cup captain in 2006, and he's been on 2 Ryder Cup teams and 2 President's Cup teams. He's a really great guy. He's going to talk about winning, what it takes to win, concentration, and he's probably going to give putting lessons too. So anyway, I just want to recommend that everybody go to our website and get signed up for the customer roundup, and we look forward to having you in Scottsdale, October 15th through the 18th. It's at a really nice resort, Plaza Resort, right on Scottsdale Road, and we'll be going to Greasewood Flats again one night. We got a lot of exciting things happening, so we're looking forward to having you all in Scottsdale again. So I'm going to turn it over now to Brad Barth. As you all know, Brad is our brain trust here, knows the most about the product. Version 12 that he's going to be presenting to you today is the largest and probably one of the biggest game-changing releases that hard dollar has ever had in its history. And it's the first time, I think, that anyone in our industry has really successfully pulled off a number of the things that Brad is going to show you. So it's really pretty exciting, and I'm going to give it to Brad. Thanks, Brad.
Thank you, Doug. Let's jump right into it. We've got a lot to cover, and as Doug mentioned, we are really excited about this particular release. We've been really working heads down on this for about 6 months now, and it's a huge release. A lot of testing going into it, and we're just thrilled to to be unveiling it here today. We'll talk about timing and how do you get it and how it's going to be rolled out towards the end. That way I make sure that everybody stays the whole time, right? So let's talk about really what drove this release and why did we do some of the things that are in this particular release. So we'll start with that. We do a lot of strategic planning. We involve customers in that process. And most recently in December, we had a strategic planning group that had customers in there, a number of folks from the industry. And one of the questions we asked was, what are your most pressing issues as it relates to your, how you manage projects, basically, from estimating all the way through. And these were the answers we got. These are the top 3 answers, I should say. By far, the biggest response we got was, we've got too many systems, too many spreadsheets, and it makes it difficult, really leads to that second one. It's very hard to kind of understand, where do we really stand on a project. And a lot of that comes from whether I'm reviewing an estimate, whether I'm trying to figure out where we are on a project. If I have to go to 3 different places to get an answer, I don't have a big comfort level in which one is correct, or are any of them correct. And then that last one there, there was a sense that, we spend all this time and all this money in the delivery stage of a project, and how do we leverage that data for the next project? How do we take those lessons learned? How do we take all that data and benefit from it so that we're not just sort of starting over on the next project? And that was a big issue for a lot of folks. A lot of people are really trying to solve that problem sort of the brute force way. They've got a lot of spreadsheets off on the side, maybe where they're tracking history, and then as we get into estimates, we're going into those spreadsheets maybe, or printouts, and trying to understand, what did previous projects look like. So this sort of sets the stage for the features that we did include in version 12. You'll see on the next screen here how they address these particular issues. There's a particular view of project controls that we like, which is sort of adopted by the Construction Users Roundtable, or CURT, and we like the way they describe project controls. And if you express that as sort of a cycle or a circle, this is what it looks like. So as we start with estimates, we go around into planning and scheduling. As we've launched the project, we're going to track our progress as we go along, managing changes through the life cycle of the project, forecasting where we think we're going to be at completion. And then that last little bit of the circle there, that sort of last mile, is what I was alluding to in terms of, once we've gone all the way around that circle on a project, make it easy for us to leverage that information, those results, so that the next time we're estimating a project, we can benefit from that. We can glean something from that. We can get more accurate, and it makes the whole cycle more efficient, more accurate, more profitable the next time around. So on the screen, you see some of the new features in version 12 that address that full cycle. Remember, the first thing that people mentioned was we want to use fewer and fewer systems as we go forward and evolve in our process. Our customers would rather do things in a few systems rather than in a few dozen systems, which is kind of the state right now. So as we flesh out more and more functionality around this life cycle, we're finding more and more adoption. Our customers are able to eliminate spreadsheets. They're able to eliminate other point systems that are no longer necessary. We're going to, for the rest of our time, we're going to cover most of these features you see listed around the circle here, and then at the end we'll pull up a much bigger list of a lot of the new features in the system and allow folks to ask questions. So let's start with the first one there, benchmarking. Benchmarking or estimate validation, you can think of that as what it's really all about is building confidence. So whether it's building confidence in internally as we're doing bid reviews, whether it's being able to justify to a customer, where did we get that number? What is that number based on? It's all about confidence. It's all about accuracy. Okay, and this is where we're going to see, bringing in those historical results and being able to leverage those to compare our current estimates and validate them. Okay, and probably the biggest thing we did with this was we made the process, it's an active process. So our customers, the feedback we got as we started talking about this was, well, yeah, we sort of do this now, but it's very cumbersome, and generally we do it at the end of the estimating stage, and if we don't have time, then we don't even do it, right? Because it's very cumbersome. So our goal was to put the historical information in front of you, right in your face as you're estimating, and give you those red, yellow, green validations to give you that comfort level as you move along. Okay, so we've made it an integral part, an ongoing part of the estimating process to do that validation, to do that historical analysis, not wait till the end. So one of the things I want to point out, what's required to do this? I'm going to show you what it looks like here in just a minute, but just so that you know, what do you need from Hard Dollar to make this happen? So if you've got, obviously, I think most of the folks on the call have the Hard Dollar application already. You may be using it to track your estimates. You may be using it to track your as-built, your job tracking. Many of you have what we call the HC reporting warehouse already. So if you have those things, you're all set. Benchmarking is part of version 12 and you're ready to go. If you need to add the reporting warehouse also feeds our enterprise reporting and analytics for Project Facts. So many of you have this already, but it's a one-time thing to add that. If you don't have it already, there's only one per customer that you need. And then at that point, all of your estimators will have access to benchmarking. There's not a per-user fee or anything like that. Now, one of the questions that always comes up when we talk about benchmarking is, well, how do we, we've got a lot of historical data somewhere else. How do we get it into the system? This was feedback we got at the last year's user conference. So we've developed integrations with a lot of financial systems, SAP, JD Edwards from Oracle, and we are working with other accounting systems to provide direct feeds back into Hard Dollar to give us that historical data. We also have the ability to load historical results. You could go back and load 5 years, 10 years of history from Excel spreadsheets. And so if you can get your data out of your accounting system into Microsoft Excel, we have a tool that you can use to feed all that information into Hard Dollar as a starting point to give you that history. Okay, so with that said, let's talk about why would you even want to do that. Let's take a look at it. I'll give you a couple screens, and then we'll jump into a little bit of a live scenario. But in this screenshot, you can see everybody is probably familiar with our CBS, cost breakdown structure. For this project, we're using a bit of a heavy civil example here. We've got items we've broken down into sub-items, right? But what we can do now is you can see right where my mouse is here. As you're estimating along and you're coming up with your estimated unit cost or your productivity, man hours per unit, units per man hour, etc., we're going to be giving you low, high, average values for each one of those line items. Okay? And then we're comparing your current estimate to that average and showing you, hey, are we in the for each item, are we in the green zone, which is sort of the safe zone, small variance to that history, or are we, in the red zone where we're very, in this case, we're 54% higher than average on excavation, or minus 34% on that embankment. So you can set these ranges. You guys can control those. What's a comfort level? Do we want to be plus or minus 5%? To be in the green zone, maybe it's plus or minus 2%. Whatever your comfort level is, you guys can control that. Now, as we drill into a particular item, you're going to be able to see right in front of you, here we've drilled into this concrete pipe item, and we can see there's our current estimate represented by that white diamond. And how does that compare to our history? You can see our actual projects, the blue diamonds that we've done in the past, and see what our cost has been on those projects, okay, based on the quantity of, in this case, pipe that we did. Right, all these historical data points are over about 500 units or so. Our current estimate is over closer to 1,000 units. Okay, and we can also see the previous estimates. So all that is right in front of you with a mouse click. The estimator doesn't have to go out and do the, pull stuff out of a spreadsheet or a book. So let's do a live scenario now as we go through and do a couple things here. I'm going to just tab over into Hard Dollar. So here's a similar project, not the exact same one, but similar. And what I've done up front, and I'll back up a little bit here as we get into this a little deeper, but I've already defined sort of what is the history that I want to look at. Do I want to look at data just in projects in Arizona, just projects in maybe in the Southwest, just projects for a certain customer? You can decide, what history do we want to look at. And once you've done that, as I'm estimating along, and I've got my current estimate, or CE here, so I can see my current estimate. Now I can see how far away am I from that benchmark average, right? Some of these are green, so I'm feeling good about those. Some of them are red. Some of these are way off, right? So a typical scenario might be, let's sort the estimate by total cost, right? So now I've sorted everything by. Let's put the let's do it again, so that way we've got the biggest items up at the top. Right now we could start to work our way down. Let's take those big items, and as we work our way down, where's the first one that's red? Right, so that excavation item there is a major item, $500,000, and I'm way off of my benchmark average. Okay, I've obviously set this scenario up, to make a dramatic example. But let's, if we drill into that, we can see, why are we so far off? So you'll see as we get into this, obviously my crew over here on the left that I'm using in my current estimate looks just like it does today in your current version. My production rate assumption is over here, 300 yards per hour. And then there's a new tab over here called benchmarking. So if I open that up, you're going to see, well, here's what the graph looks like for that item. My estimate is way up here. All that history I've got is way down here. Right, now let's take this. I'm going to take this tab like you can do for all these tabs and just pull it out, make it a separate window here. So now I can work with it. If I've got two screens, you can imagine pulling this onto another screen and just leaving it up. All right, but now as I'm estimating along, it might be nothing more than, our production rate was not supposed to be 300, it was supposed to be 1,300. And you'll see as I make that change, now my graph gives me that. Now I'm immediately into that comfort level of the green zone. My white diamond there tells me I'm at $1.05 per unit in my current estimate, and I can see that's very close to the historical data points, which are all of them within that green range, with one exception way up there on the top. All right, there's a data point up there. If I hover my mouse over it, I can see, that was a smaller quantity, 25,000 units. It was from a job in Texas back in 2010. Now I can go in and refine this if I wanted to look at, first of all, maybe I don't want to look at dollars per unit. Maybe I want to look at man hours per unit, right? Think about it more in terms of historical productivity instead of cost. Okay, we'll leave it at cost for now. But, right now I'm looking at all projects in Arizona or Texas. Maybe we want to edit that. We want to say, let's look at projects just in the state when the state's equal to, if I go to this drop down, it'll show me where I've done projects. Let's look at just Texas. And maybe we want to exclude this small quantity here. We've got a job here, this job 003, when the quantity was only 25,000. Instead of auto-including all the data points, I'm going to exclude that small item job there, right? So if I go ahead and click OK now you can see, I'm really feeling good about it now. My current estimate, now that I've drilled down to just Texas jobs, big quantities, my current estimate is within that range that we've experienced in the past. Okay, so this is a good view of benchmarking, a nice overview. Obviously, there's a lot to this in terms of implementing this, getting your history in, and as I mentioned, we are working with various accounting systems and financial systems to help streamline the process of pulling that history back into hard dollar. But if you do want to, this is something that you're interested in, your accounting system is not one we currently work with, please let us know, and we'd like to work with as many as we possibly can. And we also have services, folks that can help you get your history organized, sterilized, cleaned up, and ready to use through this benchmarking process. All right, so let's go back to our slides here, go on to the next one. So the next big feature in version 12 is control budgets. Okay, so again, this is an area where a lot of people tell us they're managing various versions of the budget outside in spreadsheets or maybe an Access database that they've built. And so what we've done here is we've really given you the ability now, when the estimate's done, we're ready to start managing the project. You can use the tools that are native to hard dollar to really get the project stood up and ready to launch, right? So we can go through and, whether it's splitting things out, rolling things up, changing the coding, applying account codes and so forth, we can get to the point where we've got we're ready to start tracking the project. At that point, we can lock in an original budget, and current estimate. They'll all be the same to start with. And then as we go forward through the project, the original budget's never going to change. That's going to be our baseline. our current budget is going to reflect any approved changes, and then that frees up the current estimate that, you know, at that point we can use that to do forecasting, we can use it to do what-ifs, we can use it to do scenarios, to deal with trends, without, you know, messing up our baseline that we're using for comparisons. Okay, so you're going to see as we get into the system and into the live scenario, you know, we've got new, imagine for the most part, you know, the columns that we previously had representing the current plan or the current estimate, we now have all those same columns for the current budget and the original budget. I've turned on just a few of those columns in this screenshot where we can see our cost, we can see our man hours, right, for both original budget, or I should say for all three, original budget, current budget, and current estimate. Okay, so just as this one shows as a starting point, they're all going to be the same, but as we go through some scenarios here, you'll see those change. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go into the live product. I'm going to switch over to a different job here, and we'll mix it up. We've been looking at kind of a heavy civil job. Let's take an oil and gas job. And I've gone to a view here, this budget comparison view, and you can see if you're in your current version of hard dollar, the current estimate set is really what you're working with today. Everything rolls up into what we now call current estimate. Okay, I've got some columns over here for original budget, or OB, and I've got a couple of columns turned on for CB, or current budget. So let's set the stage. I'm at the point where I've got my, you know, I've done the estimate, we've been awarded the project, maybe I've reorganized some things, added maybe some other scope, but I'm ready to go ahead and start tracking this project. If I click this button right here, I'm going to create the original budget and current budget, and you're going to see those columns fill in. Okay, so as I promised, as a starting point, we've got, you know, the original budget, current estimate are all on the same page. Okay, this is going to give me the ability to, for example, now as we get into job tracking, and I cheated a little bit. I had some as-builds already turned in for this project, and some transactions already completed. If we open up this project now, you can see on this exchanger work, we've done some work on a bunch of different days already, right, and some costs associated with that and so forth. So in the interest of time, I had some as-builds already turned in here, but so if we jump ahead, we can see this is the sort of view you can get. As we start tracking our percent complete, we can see, okay, well, here was our original, our current budget. Okay, we could turn on a column here for original budget as well, but we can see our current budget. So if we look at that item that's highlighted, it was the current budget, $2.3 million. Our earned value based on our percent complete so far is $1.8 million. That's what we should have spent. Our as-built is $1.7 million. So that as-built reflects either direct entries that we've made in hard dollar, or those values have come in by importing them in from an outside source like your financial system, right, from SAP or J.D. Edwards or Dexter & Cheney, Timberline, etc. Okay, so once we have those as-builts in, we can do all kinds of comparisons. We can use that as a reference point. I've turned on a few of those columns. Okay, so we can see, for example, you know, some of these items are showing up in red, meaning our as-built cost exceeds what we should have spent so far. There's an item we're almost 100,000 over on. There's one over here where we're also 50,000 over on. Okay, so any negative variance to show up in red to call your attention to them. And then we can also calculate, for example, a cost performance index. Anything greater than 1 is good. Anything less than 1 is not so good. All right, and we can see as that rolls all the way up to the top level for this refinery project, we've got a nice CPI of just a little over 1. And then what we also are giving you now is a forecast. One of the things we'll talk about towards the end is different ways of doing forecasts. Okay, so we have the ability to see all of that data in one view. Right, we can see the current budget is $42,332,000. We're currently expecting to come in at $42,232,000 based on our forecasting approach. So based on that, we're expecting to come in, with less than 1% variance compared to that current budget. Okay, so we're right on target, and obviously that's how you know this is not a real project. You can tell I just made up this data, right? So hopefully your projects look like this or even better. But that type of information is all available to you now in this view, including, again, I could turn on a column to see the original budget. Where did we start with before we started making changes to the budget? Okay, that doesn't mean all this data has to originate or be entered into hard dollar. As I mentioned, that as-built, most of our customers are pulling in that as-built information directly from their accounting system or sending it out to Excel and then bringing it in that way. Okay, let's go ahead and, so that kind of sets the stage for control budgets. And lots of different things you can do from there as we get into, if we drill into a particular item, maybe I go into that exchanger work and drill into it. We're going to have the opportunity here to look at everything based on our current estimate or our current budget. Okay, so our current estimate may change over time to reflect trends or issues that we're seeing. Some of those may or may not be approved as part of the budget or contract. So we could look at how we're actually doing our as-builts compared to our current estimate, CE, or we could change that and let's look at it based on current budget. And now you see CB across all of these tabs. Okay, but now just a little more detail compared to what we were seeing on the previous screen. Right, my original, current budget plan was 2.35. What we've spent so far is 2.2. And we can start to look at, where are we at? We've used 93% of the budget on that item, even though we've only done 80% of the work. So that might be a concern, right? And then down below we can see the history. When did we do work? How many? What was our percent complete over time as we started doing that work? All right. Now with those different sets of the budget in place, what that enables is the next thing that I'm going to show you, which is changes. This is probably the #1 thing that we hear from customers in terms of, just the critical success factor in managing a project. If you had to list one thing, it generally comes around with how successfully do we manage changes, and those changes could be, forced on us through the owner, through changes in design, changes in approach. They could be of our own making. We need to bring in a different crew than we had figured, a different equipment because what we had planned on wasn't available, or maybe we just blew the estimate, right? All of those things could lead to changes that we may want to at least capture, if not reflect those in the budget. Okay, so what we've done is we've introduced a formal change management process, okay, where we can go through and track changes as they come up. If they're approved, as we go through the process, we mark them approved, then those are going to hit the current budget. Okay, if they're not approved, then they'll be there for reference. We can track them. We can have visibility to them, but they won't be quantified into the current budget. Let's take a look at a screen, and then we'll go through a live scenario. So here's a record within what we call our budget contract changes register. This is a brand new feature, okay, and there's different types of changes that you can make. So here's a simple example of a budget move where we took some money out of our excavation item. We moved it into our embankment item. Okay, so this is, gives us the ability to move money from one part of the budget to the other, and the system is going to make sure that the net budget change in that type of a change is 0. And so if we're doing a move type, it's got to net out to 0. We take money out of somewhere, we've got to put the same amount somewhere else. We could use that for contingency drawdowns. Okay. Other types of moves are a budget contract change where maybe it's new scope. We're adding an access road that wasn't in there originally. We had to remove some stuff that we uncovered as we started excavating and haul it off. Any scope changes, right, can be dealt with through budget contract change. If we've got purely a quantity change, we have a nice simple way to deal with that, using the same assumptions, same unit costs, man-hour per unit assumptions as in the original project, just more or less quantity. We've simplified that as one of the change types. And then as we're making changes, you know, the system is going to track those for us, and like everywhere else in hard dollar, you've got this great ability to slice and dice, right, based on, you know, in this case, I've grouped all the changes by status. Okay, and those of you that are familiar with our PBS changes, just to differentiate, the PBS changes you currently have is more of an audit trail, right? As we make changes to the estimate in the background, that audit trail is building up. In this case, this is an active formal change management log where, you know, nothing goes in here unless we put it in here. And so as we're making changes, we can obviously approve them or leave them pending. We can categorize them. They're tied to certain account codes or items. And then we can group like I've done here. So we've said, let's group by status. Now I can see here's the approved changes. Here's some other changes that I'm anticipating, but I've got those in a pending state right now. So those aren't affecting the current budget. Okay, let's go in and go to the live software and take a look at what that looks like. Okay, so if we go in now to our forms menu, you're going to notice that there's a whole new form in here, budget contract changes. Okay, and this is where I can initiate a change. Ideally, you know, from the first moment that I become aware that a change is possible or likely, I can go into that register and put it in. Okay, so we might go in and do a new change. You can see I don't have any changes yet. What sort of change do we want to do? Maybe it's let's just do a budget move. Kind of keep it simple here to start with. And you can see all the opportunities here to describe that change. User-defined fields that you can call whatever you want. Drop-down tags that you can use to categorize your changes. Descriptions, notes. We'll just call this a contingency drawdown for additional scope. Okay, so just simple description of it. If I go into the details now, this is where I can decide there's two halves to this screen. What changes do I want to record in here that may affect the budget? And then is there a corresponding change that may affect the contract? Okay, so if I'm the contractor and maybe there's a new line item that I need to add to get paid for, I can add a new pay item into this process. If I'm the owner, if there's an existing contract, we may need to go in here and affect the contract. Okay, obviously on a budget move, contract is not an issue, it's all about budget. So what I'm going to do is just pop into the line items in the budget, and we'll just go in and choose. So for example, maybe this additional test here that we hadn't originally planned on doing came up, and we need to put some budget money in there for that. I've got it in my current estimate, or CE, but it's not in my current budget. So I'm going to choose that item as one of my sources here, and then I'm going to go in and say, well, where am I going to pull that money from? I've got a contingency item down here. I'm going to pull it from this. You might have multiple contingency items. You can see I've got $2 million in here for contingency. I'll just pull it from that one. Okay, and this is where now we can go in and we're not doing a quantity change or a man-hour change. I'm just going to go in and do a dollar value change. Right, so I'm going to go over here where that contingency is, and we're gonna do some moves here. So we'll take it out of our in-scope contingency. So let's say we need $50,000. So we'll take it out of there, and it's coming out of the allowance category. And we'll put it into that additional test. I could put it into the same category, or I could put it, maybe if I'm going to hire if I'm the owner and I'm going to hire a contractor to do that, we're going to add another $50,000 in there for that in the contractor cost category. Okay? If you are the contractor, obviously you're going to break the things down into labor, equipment, subs, etc. Okay? But as I've done that now, you can see down in the bottom left, it's tracking the fact that I've netted out to zero, which is exactly where I want to be. It's going to make sure that I don't, you know, when I'm doing a move, that I don't take too much out and not put it all back in somewhere else. Okay, that status is pending, right? If I go ahead and mark that approved, now the status is approved, and as we go back into our job tracking register, we're going to see current budget is now reflecting that change. So now we're up to $75,000 on that additional test. We had 25 already. We added 50. So our current budget is $75,000 for that. And if we go down to our contingency, you can see now that $50,000 we've taken out is reflected in that current budget. Right? We've got $1,950,000 left in our contingency now. Okay. If we had turned on our column for original budget, that's where we would see, you know, our contingency had started off at $2 million, right? And that additional test would have only had $25,000 in there. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense in terms of that change management process and how that information ends up. So approved changes show up in your current budget. Any unapproved changes are there for visibility and tracking. You can total them up, you can report on them, but they don't hit the budget until you mark them approved. All right, well, let's keep moving here. We'll go into the last major item that I wanted to show. It was a new feature, and that's what we call rational forecasting. And people ask us, well, what do we mean by rational forecasting? One of the things that really comes out of as we talk to people that are in the project controls business, and that is the difference between the way a project manager does a forecast and the way, let's say, an accountant does a forecast. And they're both, you know, valid approaches, but the accountant approach is generally based on numbers and you know, sort of results to date. More of a, let's say, a straight line forecast based on what we've achieved so far. You know, so if we're halfway done and we've lost $100,000, then we'll assume when we're all the way done we will have lost $200,000. Well, the reality is, of course, that there's a lot more to it than that, and the project manager takes a different approach generally because he or she is more informed in terms of what is the nature of the work that's still to come, what's the nature of those pending changes we just looked at. We may have gotten some feedback from the crew that you know, we're going to be at a different sort of productivity the rest of the way. Maybe it's something as simple as, you know, we're paving a road. Obviously, the further away we get from the plant, the longer the cycle times and the unit cost is going to be higher. If we get closer and closer to the plant, the asphalt plant, let's say, then our unit cost is going to go down. So lots of criteria like that in terms of, you know, how are we going to forecast the rest of the work. And so one of the things we've done is we've added some new forecasting methods in version 12, including a manual forecast where you can really go in and do either a bottoms-up estimate using the current estimate and all the capabilities in the estimating system to sort of re-estimate the rest of the work, or do a manual forecast kind of as a top-down and go in and plug in a number based on your judgment, based on your experience. Okay, so here's a screenshot of that, and then we'll do a live scenario. As we go into job tracking, now we can take a look at, you know, what's our forecast method. There's lots of forecast methods in that drop-down, including the new manual one that I just mentioned. Right. Now, one of the other things that we do, especially relevant to a manual forecast, is that we want to make sure that we're documenting. If we put in a manual forecast, the system's going to require us to put a note in to describe that. And it'll keep a history of, you know, who was the last person that changed that forecast, when was it changed, right? So you can always pop into that history. Okay, so we can see how our forecast evolved from, let's say, last month to this month. Let's take a real-world scenario now. If I go back into this project, okay, and we're in our job tracking register here, Let's scroll back up to some of those items that have some progress and some as-built in here. So if we take a look at this screen, we can see, our CPI, how we're doing on these various items. I'm going to turn on a column now for my forecast method. And this is where I'm going to be able to, I'm just going to drag that column into my view. This is where I can see what are the different methods that I'm using to forecast these various items. Okay. Everything starts off as current estimates. So we assume, that last most recent estimate that you did, that's, the unit cost from that is what we want to use to forecast going forward. That's, until you say otherwise, that's our assumption. I should say the assumption of the system. You can see one item here where we've said, we're going to do a manual forecast on that item right there. Okay, there may be lots of reasons for that. We could also base the forecast on the current budget, or it could be a roll-up of forecasts from child items. So this one here, for example, you can see these three items underneath it. We're not forecasting down at that level. We're forecasting up at the parent level above them. Okay, so whatever the current estimate is for that rolled up level is what we're forecasting. I could have switched that to a roll up, in which case it would forecast using the values from below. Okay, so one of the cool things about this is you can control the level of detail that you want to sort of get involved at in order to do the forecast. You don't have to go down to the very lowest level and forecast every single item. You can do that at the parent level to make that process more streamlined. Let's go into an item and just look at, I'll show you the manual forecast method. Let's use this one that's set to manual. If I open that up, and those of you that are familiar with job tracking, you see your familiar tabs up here where we can look at production, man hours, etc. I'm going to go right over into my forecast details, and let me simplify this screen. I'm going to put a few things away here a little bit just to help us focus. Okay, so here is my forecast now for this particular item, okay, these exchangers. As we look across the columns here, I can see what, my current budget, $2.35 million, same as my current estimate, so I haven't changed anything there. Okay, but for whatever reason, I've come over here and I've forecasted my total cost to be less than that. Okay, $2.31 million. Okay, now I could go into that history and see the evolution of the forecast for that item. I can see on various days we added some money in there. We reflected a $40,000 credit. So as I've changed the forecast 3 different times, it's keeping a log of that. In fact, you can see the most recent note right there. I updated that manual forecast to reflect a $40,000 deduction. And that might have been, maybe we're subbing this item out, and we're getting that for $40,000 less than we expected. So we know that that's going to be a deduction, right? Or it may be just, it could be based on the fact that we're doing the work ourselves. We're going to have a better productivity. If I go in and edit that forecast now, I can start with where I left off, but now I could go in and either override the forecast at this top level or use a number of different approaches to arrive at that number. So I could either enter it in. This is essentially my estimate at completion. This is where I'm forecasting my total cost to be. Or I could say, you know what, I think we're going to come in like I did here, $40,000 under budget. Okay, so I'm going to gain $40,000. So I can put the value in as a plus or minus adjustment. I could also use an improvement factor. So if I think we're going to do, we're going to do 25% better than we've done so far, I can put it in as you see there, 1.25. All of these values are connected. And in fact, even if I expand this out all down to the cost category level, you can see here it's all in materials and subs or contractors, right? And if I change any of those values I just mentioned, you'll see them either roll up or roll down. So maybe maybe let's just make it a $60,000 credit, right? If If I think we're going to end up $60,000 under budget, then I can just go ahead and enter that in. That gives me a new forecast total cost. Okay. Or I think maybe my, my labor, or excuse me, my material costs at $150,000. Maybe I know that that is now only going to be $125,000. I can just change that, and that rolls up to give me a new forecast total cost. Okay, so this is kind of this manual forecast approach is really positioned in between. You can go into the CBS, use all the estimating capabilities that we have, and use your current estimate as the forecast. Okay, but this approach is more sort of, it's at a higher level without going down down at the crew level, production level. I can go in here and make simple adjustments at the cost category level, the total cost level, or by applying a factor up or down, and do a manual forecast. And I can flip that switch at any time. If I go ahead and update the forecast now, let's take it down to, let's say, total of $2.2 million. Okay. As I make that change at the top level, you may have noticed that pushes it down down below. It makes some assumptions around, well, let's lower everything in order to get to 2.2 million. Okay. Or again, I could have gone from the bottom up. But now if I go ahead and update the forecast, it's going to ask me to use the note that I've already got in there or put in a new one. I have to put in a note, and we'll say, here's where we can, put in, why, did we change it, right? This is where we have a chance to document any kind of notes we want to help explain why we use that number. And now, my forecast that's in the history, I can see when I last changed it. And as we go back into our job tracking register, we can see our forecast is now 2.2 million. Okay, so based on those forecast methods that we're using for each item, as we look down at the total of that forecast column, we can see now we're forecasting 42.23 million total, and you compare that back to the current budget of 42.33 million. Okay, and at the very top level up here, we can see we're forecasting now about 0.23% variance compared to that current budget. All right, I know we've covered a lot of ground quickly. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring up a list of other enhancements in version 12. I'm not going to go through every one of these, obviously, but I wanted to bring them up so that you're at least aware of them. And if you have any questions about anything that we've looked at or any of these other enhancements that are up on the screen, we're going to go ahead and take any questions that have been submitted. So if you do have a question, if you can use the GoToMeeting panel, probably over to your right, to submit your question, and we'll spend the last 10 minutes here answering any questions anybody has.
Okay, we have one question. Would the percent complete have to be a direct entry, or could it be as built pulled from an accounting software as well if it's recorded there?
Okay, so I think the question was around, how does percent complete get into the system? Okay, and there are a number of ways to do that. So if we come back into our job tracking register, and if we look at any of these items that have the plus sign on them, we've got percent completes in here. If you look at that entry method there, you can see these are all tagged as direct entry, meaning we type those directly into hard dollar. Okay. There's other approaches. We can use a data source to pull in your percent complete. So a data source could be Excel, it could be an XML file, it could be coming from SAP, from JD Edwards, from your financial system. So lots of ways to get those entries in. Really, the key is to make sure that you've got a code, whether it's an account code or a phase code, so we know if you're going to bring it in from an outside system, we need to know, some code in common. So when we're importing those percent completes, we can build up this log for you and make sure they go obviously to the right item. Okay, but obviously, ideally, those percent completes are getting in here electronically, either from the original entry. Keep in mind, you know, Hard Dollar does have a timesheet field data collection system. If you're looking to get off of pencil and paper, you know, we have an option for that, which will feed these as-built quantities, these quantities completed, and calculate your percent complete. Those will come in automatically from our timesheets, which is a third option. So, short answer to the question after a long explanation, I guess, is you know, they can be directly entered, percent completes directly entered into the system, imported in from, let's say, Excel or your accounting system, or last option, bring those in from our timesheet system.
Thanks, Brad. Next question, who can approve a change, every HD user, or is it role-based?
Yeah, great question. One of the things that we made sure that we did, and you may have noticed it looks a little odd, if we go into a particular change, notice the only way to approve the change is through the menu. I can either go on my toolbar, or I can go to Edit, and this one's already approved, but the point is that the only way to approve it is to get through the menu system, which means, you know, our Hard Dollar's built-in menu-based security system can be applied to control, you know, who has the ability to approve a change or not. So certainly the companies we've been working with as sort of early adopters of this, the feedback we've seen is that, you know, there's a limited, first of all, a limited number of people that can go into the changes register and put stuff in there, but there's even a more limited number of people that can approve those changes and have them affect the current budget. So you can control that through the security roles that are accessed through library user profiles.
Okay, next question. What capability does the new release of HD have to report on a portfolio of active projects as a whole?
Oh, great questions. We could spend we could spend an hour just on that. In fact, let me go. Let's go back to a bit of a picture here. If we go back to this view here, if you can envision a next arrow going to the right, okay, we have something called Project Facts. Okay, so Hard Dollar version 12 adds a bunch of new things, a bunch of new data, right? Whether it's you know, change data, whether it's budget data, whether it's forecasting data. All of that information flows into our reporting warehouse. Okay, so when we're talking about cross-project reporting, the one requirement is this reporting warehouse, because as everybody knows, as you're looking at individual projects in the Hard Dollar client, you can report on each individual project right inside the project. If you want to report across projects and look at things at the portfolio level, or look at, you know, let's say averages or variances across a bunch of projects, then we're talking about Project Facts. So if you have Project Facts already, you know, all of a sudden now with version 12, you got a lot more data to report on. Okay? If you don't have Project Facts already, you know, there's multiple versions of that depending on the amount of data that you're going to be storing in that data warehouse, as well as how many users do you need that are going to be reporting on that. That's a web-based reporting tool for those that aren't aware of what Project Facts is, where you can feed your data into that from your existing Hard Dollar system, and then enable people to go and get reports right via the web. People don't even have to have the Hard Dollar client in order to look at portfolio dashboards, reports, right through Project Facts.
Does Hard Dollar benchmarking support different criteria? For example, benchmark against an account code or a phase code, descriptions?
Yeah, another great question. If we let's go back to that job that we were using to benchmark. So I kind of skipped over it in terms of what, you know, where did all this historical data come from? Let's jump back into that. If I go into job properties for my current estimate, which is job 1, and you'll see a new tab over here called benchmarking. This tab is where you can define, for this estimate that I'm currently working on, what do I want to use as my historical data? Do I want to use as estimated values from previous projects? I've said yes. Do I want to use as built? Yes. And then these two questions here are around, the first one here is around specifically the question in terms of how do we match up the items? Okay, I've done just using the CBS code, because I know that all my jobs have a standard CBS code structure in them, so I know that 3.1 is always excavation. Right, now that's probably not a realistic scenario. So we do give you the ability to define as elaborate as you want of a matching scheme. So what we're seeing mostly is people are going to match against maybe a phase code or a account code. You might break your account codes into different segments. Maybe you're only going to match on the second segment of the account code, or it's got to match on the whole code. This is a Boolean structure here, so we could say, you know what, it's got to match on the account code, and it's also maybe the description's got to match. Right? So if I'm comparing one item, to make sure it's apples to apples with my history, I'm not going to get a false comparison. I'm only going to give you that matchup and that history if the account code is the same as the history and the description is the same as the history. Maybe I have some items where the account, I used to match on description, but now I match on account code, so maybe instead I'm going to make that an OR scenario. If either the account code or the description match, then it's considered a match and I've got my history coming up. So pretty, and you can just keep building. You see as I added another part of the scenario, it just keeps adding more and more fields there that I can use to define how we're going to match. Same thing goes, just in case we probably have another question around how do we define what jobs we look at. And just real quick while we're here, you can see here I've said let's look at all jobs where state equals Arizona or Texas. All of your job categorization fields are available to filter on. I only want to look at history in a certain country, county, only jobs maybe that were done for a certain customer, only jobs that were prior or after a certain date. Any of your user-defined fields at the job level you can use to narrow down that historical set to make it as relevant as possible to the current job.
Okay, the next question is, the interface with the ERP systems native, or should it be developed to fit the client's specific necessities, and is the HD API used for that, or what do we use?
Yeah, so we get a lot of questions around, how do we tie in with accounting systems? One of the things we're seeing as a trend out there is that people are kind of standardized. As we talk about, using fewer and fewer systems through the whole process, we're seeing standardization around really three key systems: your scheduling system, whether it's Primavera, Microsoft Project, your financial system, and your PCM, Project Cost Management System, which is, obviously PCM, the category hard dollar created, filling, estimating, and all the things we've just talked about. So those three systems really cover, the most of that project controls life cycle. And so, we want to make sure that we integrate, in a very open fashion, a very easy fashion on either side, both with scheduling systems and financial systems. So we are working directly with a number of financial systems. Some of those, as Doug mentioned, are going to be at our user conference, and we're always looking to expand what's included in those integrations. Some of those are essentially ready to use out of the box, like Timberline, Dexter and Cheney, Viewpoint, etc. Some of them are more customized per customer, like an SAP or a JD Edwards are very rarely the same on a customer-by-customer basis. So we can help develop those integrations. If you have a different accounting system we don't currently integrate with, we can develop those. Usually they're not very difficult. You might be talking about a week's worth of professional services work. Or we can also customize the existing integrations to your particular needs. And then the last thing I'll say about that is we do have an API that you can use to, if you've got the technical skill set on your side, you can create integrations to hard dollar on your own without involving hard dollar. We can certainly give you guidance, But that is something that we've enabled. Our customers can do that themselves.
Okay, we have a few more questions. We'll try and get to all of them, and if we don't get to all of them, we will definitely answer them to the group through the follow-up email. Does Hard Dollar report on the exchange risk variance between a committed cost at one exchange rate and estimated cost at another exchange rate?
Okay, so I believe the question is around if we've committed. I heard the word committed. So if in the budget we've committed a portion of the scope to a dollar value that's based on one exchange rate, and now maybe that was 3 months ago. Now we've got a different exchange rate. We do have the ability to create multiple instances of the exchange rate. So in other words, you could estimate the original value might be estimated using exchange rate at time 1 between any two currencies. At time 2, you could go in and apply a different exchange rate, and then you could look at, in fact, the changes log would automatically show you the difference between those two. So if we plug in one exchange rate, we can see, well, maybe that had a $50,000 impact, and you can then categorize that impact as currency related or exchange rate related, and then you could filter all of your changes. Imagine filtering that changes log by, show me all the changes that came up due to currency exchange rate fluctuations. So that is something that we added back in version 10, and hopefully those of you that are doing international projects and dealing with that issue are aware of that. But you can go into the foundation setup data and put in those exchange rates, manage those currencies right there. So you can have multiple currencies, multiple conversion rates between any two currencies, and change those exchange rates at any point. And also, one thing that we do have, just to point out, if we go back to the last slide that we were at, one of the things that was on the bottom of that list is, we are continuing to build out different language versions, by the way. So we do have, with version 12, we do have the Spanish version and the Portuguese version. And so now we do support English, Spanish, and Portuguese. And we are, we've got an infrastructure now where we can easily create additional language versions based on demand and requests from customers.
This one should be a quick question. Which versions of Primavera P6 do we integrate with Hard Dollar?
So we support now, with version 12, we support P6 up to version 8.2.
One last question. Does Hard Dollar benchmarking allow for the modification of the cost at the item level, override the default job configuration?
Run that by me again one more time.
Does Hard Dollar benchmarking allow for modification at the cost item level? I think the example is overriding the default job configuration.
Yes. So the question, if we go into, let's go back to the thing here where we have some benchmark data. As you saw when we went into the cost basis, we set the job level rules to say, we're gonna look at history based on maybe projects in multiple states. So the question is, can we override that when we get down to an individual item? The answer is absolutely yes. For several reasons. We might want to expand the universe of historical data for an item where we may not have, maybe it's not an item we do all the time, so maybe we need to go back further in time or expand our geographic boundaries. Or the other way around, if we get into an item where we've got 100 data points, maybe we want to filter that down to a much narrower, more relevant set, to get a good benchmark average. So here at the item level, if I'm in here at this item, I can go into my settings, and right here is where I can override, which I think was the term you used in the question. I can override that job default, and in fact, you can see this as we've done that on this one. The job level default was we're going to look at jobs in Arizona or Texas. Here for this override, we've said let's look at just Texas, right? And we could even further narrow that down. We could say let's look at just Texas and maybe projects that were you know, going back 2 years, or maybe only projects of a certain type, right, or in a certain further, you know, maybe Texas is too wide. We want to narrow it down by city or some other location. So absolutely, you can override those job level settings at the item level.
Okay, with that, we want to thank everyone for their time. Just wanted to let everyone know we will provide you with a recording of this webcast, and we encourage you to forward that on to your colleagues that would want to know about all the new great features. And the general availability will begin, and we'll start rolling that out August 20th. Our existing customers, watch for an email from product development with a download link with step-by-step instructions. And if you do have any questions, we encourage you to check out all the new features and what we have available with the video at harddollar.com. Thank you so much for your time.